In 2015, most people would like to believe that racial bias or stereotypes no longer exist. And in most cases, they don't. I think all of us would readily admit that things are more racially progressive than ever before. And yet, even with that being said, there's still that notion of racial categorization, bias, racial connotations, and ways of thinking about other people that still exist to this day. For example, what do you see or what do you feel when you see this image? What about this image? Well, as you could probably guess, these images represent stereotypes. Stereotypes, by definition, according to an article in Simply Psychology published in 2008, is a fixed or overgeneralized belief about a particular group of people or race. And so, for example, as the article brings out, a Hell's Angel biker dresses in leather. Well, immediately when you think of a biker, you have that thought process of them being dressed in leather, maybe tattoos, long hair. That's an immediate image or categorization that comes to mind. And in some cases, stereotypes can have a positive connotation. Um, but most people are associated with the negative aspects of stereotypes. And so, in choosing the story I did for my paper, I chose to focus on uh, Recitatif by Toni Morrison. Toni Morrison is a world renowned Nobel Prize as well as Pulitzer winning writer and has authored many books. And in the case of Recitatif, she wrote this short story back in 1983. It was part of an anthology of stories written by African American women. And so, in writing this story, she eloquently and very skillfully addresses race and stereotypes in such a way that the reader is forced to look within themselves as to how they categorize people of another race. And the way she does this is by focusing the story on two young girls named Twyla and Roberta. One is black and one is white. But in writing the story, she never explicitly says which one is black and which one is white. She gives the reader clues as to the texture of their hair or uh, how one may say a certain particular thing, how they dress. But she never specifically says Twyla is the white girl, Roberta is the black girl, or vice versa. And in so doing, it really forces the reader to look inward as to how they perceive a certain race to behave or to act, or what a black person would do, what a white person would do. And so by doing this, by her method of blurring the racial lines, as it were, she challenges readers to, their preconceptions of race and culture, and really, like I said, makes you look within yourself as to how the reader thinks about different races. Because whether we want to believe it or not, we're all affected by racial stereotypes. Whether we've been stereotyped ourselves, whether we've done it to other people, it's the norm, so to speak. And so once we're able to kind of get beyond that thought of categorizing people, pigeonholing people, only then can we have an open and honest dialogue about race. And one of the scenarios that Morrison presents, the story is told over a course of 5 vignettes of Twyla and Roberta, their encounters with each other throughout their from childhood through their adult lives. And in one of the encounters I found very just very insightful was in the fact that meeting at one point in their later adult years, Twyla is married and living a modest middle class lifestyle with her husband James. Roberta, on the other hand, has married a high powered, well off, financially well off executive who works for IBM, even to the point where Roberta has her own driver. And so the girls or the women meet in the grocery store and they immediately, reconnect and have lunch. And just by the notion of planting in our minds, okay, Twyla is living a modest lifestyle, middle class, and lives with her in-laws. Roberta, on the other hand, upwardly mobile, financially well off, even has a driver. Surely Twyla must be the black woman because, as stereotypes would allow, in a lot of cases, black people may not always be as well off as white people, or so it would seem. Whereas Roberta certainly has to be the white woman because obviously she's married well, she's living well, she's financially well off, her husband's an IBM executive, so surely that must be the case. But in the midst of their conversation of reconnecting, Twyla begins to think about how easy they have it, how things are good for them. So in reading this, you begin to wonder, well, especially since this is taking place during the 70s, 60s or 70s, could it be that Twyla is perhaps the middle-class white woman who was maybe resentful toward Roberta, who is perhaps an upwardly mobile, affluent African-American woman? Being so during that time, a lot of black people were starting to make waves in the financial world, as it were. So, Morrison cleverly plants that seed in your mind of how either character could represent either way of thinking. The point is, how do you look at the races, or how does the reader look at the races? What is their preconceived thought of black people, of white people? And so, as I said, that's the beauty of this story. It challenges racial stereotypes. It causes the reader to look within themselves as to who or how a certain race behaves, and really how it really doesn't make sense to try to pigeonhole people, because really, as different as we are, that's what makes the world go round, so to speak. So it really just goes to show, by her removing racial identity, by not making that the focus of their relationship, they're really just two women who are friends. And although they may not always agree on certain things, they never allow race to become what they disagree about. And so really that's the bottom line. It really help me to appreciate, to look within myself, and how do I view people of a different race, and how really I am affected by stereotypes. As I said earlier, unfortunately, I've been stereotyped, and on the other hand, I have stereotypes. And once we can get to that honesty within ourselves, then we can have open dialogue, open conversation, and only then can we move past the pigeonholing and opinions already formed about people. And so, although this story was written in 1983, 30 years ago, I absolutely believe it still resonates in our day and time. And we can truly learn from the story that Morrison is conveying, how the subtlety that she discusses race, really, it is an open discussion of race, whether we want to believe it or not. The innuendos, so to speak, really give cause for open talking about this subject, and I really appreciated it. Hopefully you will appreciate it too if you get the opportunity to read it. I would wholeheartedly suggest reading this short story. Once again, Recitatif by Toni Morrison.